In this tutorial, we'll be going over how to produce an axonometric drawing in Rhino using your Rhino files. To do this, I'm going to basically the first thing we have to do is set our view. Normally, we will be modeling in perspectival view, but we have to set it to an isometric view. And to do that, we go to View, Set View, Isometric. And we can start with southwest, and you should pick an angle that captures the geometry as efficiently as possible. In this partial model, looking at the model from this angle seems to work well. Now we can also tilt the angle for the axonometric drawing, but in this case I'm not going to play with that. I'm going to take these 45-degree angles as a preset. Now before we do make 2D, you should make sure that some of the objects could be put into different layers. For instance, the columns could be in individual layers, and that's what I did in my model. I put these 3 columns into a column layer. I put the cornice details that have tons of lines and details into a cornice layer, and then the remaining geometry is put into the other layers, basically, so that when we do make 2D, when we type in make 2D, what happens is when we choose maintain source layers and hit OK, the drawing that we get will have different layers or different layer properties assigned to them. So in this case, that's what we are seeing. We are seeing that the columns are put into a column layer, and these geometries are put into corresponding layer. Now, this basically does 80 or 90% of the work, but you should keep actually cleaning this drawing. For instance, these lines do not exist in the model that we're working with, so what I need to do is clean this drawing up. So delete these lines. These lines are disconnected, so we can use trim extend tools to make sure that they are connected. We can use fillet tools with radius 0 to connect these lines so that we can show the steps. And if you have some geometries that are not fully visible, try to extend them or try to draft them as efficiently as possible. So in this case, maybe we can close these geometries. If make 2D doesn't give you something or gives it to you in a disorganized way, you should try to clean it as much as possible. So in this case, for instance, this part is kind of cluttered. What I do is I try to draft them using arches, and we can just do a 3-point arc here, and then turn off grid snap, and then try to kind of eyeball it, and then try to model these lines. And let's looking at it as well, like we get some, looking at it a bit more, we get additional lines here. We can delete them. So once you clean it up, you will get something that looks a bit like this. So you would have these lines as cleaned, these geometry lines as cleaned, and then what I added is this outlining geometry. So let me show you what it looks like. So this guy actually goes around all the geometry, as we're going to use these to separate it from the background drawing, and that's basically going to give the model and the drawing a little bit more depth. So what I do is go around the model with these lines and split these geometries along these edges so that we can assign them to a different layer. So splitting a geometry, or for instance this guy, how do we split it? Let's say this was joined. What I do is type in split, select geometry, select this as a splitting geometry, and this portion will be assigned to the outline layer so that we can give them a thick line weight in Illustrator. The next thing I do is I want to highlight these pochets here, and to do that I'm basically choosing these lines. Let's give them to the cornice layer, and this profile I basically highlighted and joined because I wanted to assign it as a fill in Illustrator, and you can make sure that that's a closed geometry by choosing it and typing in hatch, If Rhino can hatch it, then you can turn it into a fill in Illustrator later on. So that's basically what we need to do. Produce a line template, line weight drawing template like this in Illustrator. That's part one. And the second part is take a rendering of our model. And to do that, I'm going to go back to the same view angle. Try to make sure that you're not actually tilting your view or rotating this anyway, because this image is going to overlap with the line drawing. So I choose the file, and what I want to do is first clean out all the lines. So I'm going to type in select curve and then hide them temporarily. And I want to pick a sun angle so that we can render this viewport. To do that, I'm going to create a directional light. Let's create a directional light by going to render tools. First of all, set your render to be current render to be Rhino render. We're going to take Rhino rendering. Then I'm going to create a line directional light. So the directional light is located here. So what we do is you place a target and you place a source, and then this light will cast some shadows. But what we want to do is you can switch to wireframe mode, choose the light source, and we're going to rotate this so that we can capture the model as efficiently as possible. So while the light is selected, switch to rendered mode, and then turn on the gumball, and then try to rotate the light source using these three axes so that we can get a line, we can get a light setting that kind of captures the geometry as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to find an angle that casts some shadows but also doesn't leave anything in the dark, right? So that's something important. So try to get it to an angle that captures the geometry as efficiently as possible, and cast some shadows at some depth as well. Then once this is done, choose your form and go to render settings, and under render settings choose transparent background. Set your resolution to be really high, so like 3000 by 2000. Change DPI to 300, and with transparent background enabled, hit OK, and then in Rhino hit render and save the file as a .png with a transparent background. And what we are going to do is in the next part overlap them in Illustrator and create our drawing.